hush, it's time to rest now. Let your shoulders drop. Let the weight of the day slide gently off your body. You're safe here. You're warm, and nothing is urgent anymore. Breathe in slowly. Hold it just for a moment, and now let it go. Let your eyes grow heavy like dust settling over a quiet village. Feel the gentle hush of night wrapping around you like a thick woolen blanket. You may hear the rustle of leaves far away, or the faint crackle of a fire. It's alright to drift now, let go, because our story tonight begins in a cellar beneath a forgotten house, where a single flame dances atop a stub of wax, and a grandmother wrapped in wool and memory begins her nightly ritual. Begin storytelling section. The walls were made of crumbling stone, not the smooth, well-cut kind, but old chipped bricks held together by time, dirt, and stubbornness. A single wooden stair creaked under each careful step. The air was cool, not quite cold, but thick with the scent of old potatoes, dry soil, and quiet. She always lit the candle the same way. 3 matches. One always broke. The second never struck. The third whispered to life with a soft hiss, and its orange-blown shadows leapt to greet her. Her grandson, a small boy with eyes too wide for his face, sat cross-legged on an old blanket beside the wall. He didn't speak. He never did during this time. Not because he was told to be quiet, but because the ritual had a rhythm, and breaking it would be like waking a sleeping bird. The cellar was filled with sounds if you listened. The slow drag of a potato sack across the floor, the faint tap of rice hitting an old tin cup, the occasional scurry of a rat weaving through cracks in the wall, not frightened, but cautious. And in the center of it all, her voice. It came slowly, like the first snow dot, soft dot even. Never rushed. Tonight, she said, her fingers sorting through a cloth bundle. We have exactly 6 small potatoes. 2 cracked, 1 still firm. Boy's eyes followed her hands. There was no judgment in her words, only gentle reverence, as if naming each item gave it strength. And 3 handfuls of rice to dried figs, and a pinch of salt, just a pinch. She pinched the air for effect. He smiled, though his lips barely moved. The candle flickered again. Breeze, perhaps from the broken vent above, or perhaps just the cellar exhaling. Outside, the world made noise. Distant boots on gravel, dogs barking sharp, echoing barks that faded quickly. But here, in the earth-wrapped belly of the house, was only quiet. She took one of the cracked potatoes and placed it near the candle. It wasn't for eating done, not yet. It must dry first, she whispered, as though the potato were listening. To soften it spoils, to dry and it turns to dust. Her hands knew this dance. She had done it before, long before the world above had gone quiet, and long before food had names like glass and only. She stirred the rice gently in its tin cup, the sound like wind brushing over paper. Did I ever tell you about the cellar bird? She looked at the boy. His eyes blinked slowly. It meant yes. A long time ago, she began. There was a bird who lived down here, a little thing, gray and brown, quiet like a shadow. She'd perch right there. She pointed to a wooden beam, sagging with age, and she only sang when no one was listening. The boy's head tilted as if to say, "How do you know, then?" The grandmother's smile deepened, because I wasn't listening once, and I heard her. The candle crackled soft like footsteps on dry leaves. In the far corner, the rats moved again, not frantic, just alive. Even they had grown used to the ritual. Perhaps they listened too. She placed a single fig in a cracked bowl. Its sweetness would last through the week if rationed. Everything now was about pacing. The world above may be hungry, she murmured, but down here, we still have stories. The boy leaned back, his head against the stone. His breath had slowed. She could hear it soft, steady, like wind through dry grass. She reached into her apron and pulled out a piece of twine, knotted at one end. Every night she added a knot, one for each day they'd endured. Each knot a little anchor, holding them in place. One more, she whispered. For today, the knot pulled tight between her fingers. The boy's eyelids fluttered. He was nearly there. She leaned closer, her voice now like a hush in a chapel. When the war ends, we'll plant real potatoes. Not cellar ones, not fat ones. Warm from the earth. The boy smiled in his sleep. His chest rose and fell like waves lapping against the shore of some dream. She pulled the blanket over him, tucking it beneath his chin. The cellar grew quieter still. The rats had paused. Even the wind seemed to listen. Sleep, little one, dream of warm bread and bright tonight, and as the candle dipped low, casting long amber shadows, the cellar exhaled soft and safe and full of quiet.
The candle's flame had melted low, forming a golden pool at its base, and yet it still glowed with a tender pulse, as if reluctant to sleep, just like the boy once was. The grandmother did not move quickly. She moved like time had slowed for her. Each motion was deliberate, careful, a gesture filled with purpose. There was no need for haste here, only patience, only peace. She sat back onto her own cushion, stitched long ago with scraps of an old apron, faded flowers still barely visible in the cloth. Your mother used to play here, she whispered. Though the boy had already drifted far away into dreams, she wasn't really talking to him now, but to the cellar, to the stone, to the silence that always listened. She danced between the crates with her arms full of air. She smiled and pretended she was baking a feast with nothing but dirt and water. Her eyes shimmered, but the candle's light softened. The tears made them seem like reflections of memory rather than sorrow. A breeze moved through again, softly, gentler than before, as though even the air had heard her tale and chose to tread lighter for it. She picked up the tin spoon and stirred a dry pot. There was nothing inside, but the sound it made. It comforted, metal over metal, a hollow echo that filled the corners of the cellar like a lullaby with no words. They used to sing songs too, she said, almost to herself. Do you remember the one about the turnip? Silence answered, but it was a kind silence, the kind that waits rather than denies. So she sang, very softly, very slowly, a song in a minor key, barely above a whisper, the kind of song only grandmothers knew. Its words lost to time, but its melody carried gently by heartbeats, passed down like hand-stitched cloth. Her voice echoed faintly off the stones, as though the cellar itself hummed along. And outside, the night deepened. The distant footsteps faded altogether. No shouting, no barking, just the world turning quietly. Above them, the moon might have risen, but they couldn't see it. They hadn't seen it in weeks. Not clearly, but they knew it was there, still shining. She reached for her jar of salt. Only a pinch left, but she smiled as she held it close to the candle, watching the tiny crystals catch the flicker. Salt is memory, she whispered. It keeps things from vanishing. It reminds them to stay. She rubbed a few grains between her fingers, then tapped them gently into her palm, pressing them into a small cloth pouch tied with thread. For tomorrow's stew, she said, though she didn't know if there would be water to make it. But saying it aloud made it rich. And sometimes hope was just a matter of speaking softly into the dark. She stood slowly, knees crackling louder than the firewood. Her body stiff, but not tired. She placed her hand against the wall, felt the stone's coolness against her skin, steady, solid, unchanging. Greater than good night, Cellar, she said quietly. Thank you! The rat squeaked in reply just once. A tiny sound, but one that felt like a nod. As she stepped lightly toward the stairs, she cast one last glance at the sleeping boy. His hand was curled beneath his cheek, his brow smooth, his breath still steady. He hadn't stirred, not once. She watched him for a long time. Not for fear, but for comfort, to memorize the shape of this moment, the stillness of it, the peace in his tiny chest rising and falling. Then, with the last warmth of the candle, she reached for a wooden crate near the stairs. Inside was a journal, its pages yellowed, the ink faded in places. But each page held something real, a story, a recipe, a name, a number of potatoes counted, and memories folded between the lines like herbs in a drawer. She opened to a blank page, dipped her finger into a bit of charcoal, and wrote, greater than days, 71, 1 fig, 6 potatoes, 3 handfuls of rice. A smile, a song, and sleep came gently. She closed the journal, brushed the ash from her finger, and blew out the candle. Darkness came, but not like fit, more like a warm hand placed gently on the shoulder. And as the cellar settled into stillness, so too did the house above, the street beyond, and the world waiting for dawn. Night deepened, not in a rush, but like ink slowly seeping through cloth, wrapping the corners of the world in gentle shadow. Upstairs, the floorboards groaned occasionally, not from footsteps, but from memory. The kind of old wood that remembers shoes, games, laughter. And the echo of lives lived out in warmth. But below, beneath it all, the cellar dreamed quietly. The boy stirred slightly, only once. His tiny hands stretched outward and brushed against the edge of the stone wall. He didn't wake, but the stone received him. The grandmother had made her way back down again, though there was no light this time. She didn't need it. Her steps knew the way. Her feet knew which stairs to avoid and which ones whispered too loud. She moved slowly through the dark, like someone brushing against silk curtains. Her breath was steady, her body present, grounded in this hush-filled moment. She knelt by the sleeping child, adjusted the blanket where it had slipped from his shoulder, and placed her palm against his forehead. Not to check the fever, just to feel the warmth of life beneath her finger. The ground holds us, she murmured, even when the world above forgets. There were stories she hadn't yet told, ones too precious, too sacred, to give away when the days were still thin and brittle. But tonight, she would share one more. She didn't raise her voice, only let it flow, soft as breath against candle wax. Once, long ago, she began. There was a woman who lived in the roots of an old apple tree. Her eyes stared forward into the dark, but her voice held light within it. The tree was all that remained of her home. War had swallowed everything else. The fields, the fences, even the name of her village. But she refused to leave the tree. Outside, a breeze passed across the ruined fields, rattling through scorched branches and dry grass. Every day, she whispered to the roots, and every night she listened, not for answers, but for comfort, for proof that she still existed, even if no one else remembered. She paused, not because she'd forgotten the next part, but because silence was part of the story too. One winter, the roots gave her back a seed, just one, wrapped in a curl of bark. The boy shifted in his sleep, his brow twitching, as if somewhere deep in the world of dreams, he stood beside that tree, listening. She carried the seed in her palm for 7 days, and on the 8th, she placed it under her tongue. A soft sigh escaped the grandmother's lips, almost like a yawn, but quieter, deeper, heavier with meaning. That spring, an apple tree grew from her voice. She let the words linger, resting in the quiet. And every fruit that tree bore tasted like the story she had never spoken. She leaned down and kissed the boy's temple, a slow, delicate press. Her lips barely touched his skin. But it was enough to remind him somewhere far within that he was safe, he was home. Even if the walls crumbled, even if the sky fell, there was warmth in memory, in ritual, in the gentle counting of dry potatoes, in the naming of grains. She turned once more toward the function. The crate of salt, the thread-knotted string, the broken spoon that had served them faithfully for months. One by one, she touched them all, as though each item were a relic. Not of hunger, but of perseverance. And then, slowly, she knelt on the cool cellar floor, the stone pressed into her knees. The earth beneath cradled her. She closed her eyes. Her hands rested on her lap, and she whispered once more, not to the boy, not to the house, but to the door. We have what we need. We have enough for tonight, and that is everything. Her breath deepened, matching the rhythm of the earth, of sleep, of peace. The rats did not stir. The wind no longer wandered. Even the stones grew still. In the morning, the candle would be lit again. The rice would be counted anew, not tied. And the story would continue. But for now, there was only warmth, stillness, and the hush of quiet love beneath the surface of the world. So rest now. Feel the hush wrap around your chest like a thick quilt. Breathe gently, let go. Let your dreams grow roots in the soil of quiet things. Let them bloom slowly, safely in the dark. The story has ended, but sleep has just begun.